The next morning, Joe was awake early, mostly because he barely slept. He heard his parents getting ready to leave for the day. He got up and noticed a message on his pad. "Come see me before you head anywhere this morning. J. Oliver." He wondered why the captain wanted to see him this morning. He messaged Lan and found that she too was already awake and ready to start the day. Got a message from Captain O, heading to the dock to see him first. "Come with?" "Are you kidding?" she replied. "Of course! Meet me outside the Arboretum at 0900. "Okay." He silenced his pad and finished up. Heading to the kitchen, he met his dad, finishing a coffee on the way out. "Good morning," his father said. "Big plans for today?" "Yes, well, sort of. Lan and I are heading over to the port to meet the captain," Joe replied. "Did he find something?" his father asked. "I don't know. He just said to come see him this morning. You think he found something out?" Joe was eager, and you could hear it in his voice. His father felt it might be wise to temper high expectations with a little realism. Maybe he found something, or maybe he just confirmed it was a hoax, and no ship named Celestron was launched, or it was destroyed, or is a known derelict. Remember, he said he thought there was a chance this was an elaborate scam. Joe's dad looked concerned. He didn't want his son to get his hopes up, only to find out the whole thing was a fake. "I know, Dad, but there's still a chance it's real, too." Joe's youthful optimism remained unhindered by reality. "Even if it isn't real, we'll still get back on board the Sundancer for a while." "Well, I guess there is that." His father was unconvinced. He was a little envious of the boy's youthful ability to believe in the pot of gold still. He was just concerned that finding out the pot was empty might not do him any good. Still, the adventure alone would be worth it. He mentally shrugged. "Okay, son. Just try not to get into any trouble today. I'm heading to work. Keep me posted on the search results." "Okay, Dad. I will." Joe was almost relieved. Now that his parents had left, the risk to his imminent adventure was minimized. He messaged Lon, "On my way," and bounded out the door. A short time later, Lan and Joe were standing in the lock outside the gangway to Sundancer. They were working up the courage to request access when the captain's voice said, "Good morning. Been expecting you. Come on up." They walked as quickly as they dared down the passage to see the captain standing in the open lock. He seemed cheerful and was wearing an antique flight suit. The sage green and silver trim still looked new, though the suit had to have been issued a century ago. "Come aboard!" "Have you eaten?" "I've just started breakfast myself. I was up late digging through the database and slept in a bit." As they walked into the ship, the captain guided them into a section they hadn't seen on their tour. When they hesitated, he explained, "There are my private quarters. I usually don't show them to strangers. However, as it seems we're bound together for a while, I'm making an exception." They passed through the hatch into the captain's private quarters. They stopped and stared. His personal portion of the ship was only a tiny percentage of the ship's internal volume, but it was still a huge space. Vaulted ceilings, the walls had shelves with books, actual books, and various artworks. They passed through 2 more rooms, one that only contained an ancient telescope, a chair, and a small table. The other was a more mundane private gymnasium. Through this last door, they came to a elegantly equipped but purely functional kitchen. There was a small table with 4 chairs, all designed to stay attached to the floor, under 0 G or high acceleration. They stood there, unsure of what to do. "Please sit. Are you hungry? I'm starving. I've probably cooked too much, so feel free to eat." They took seats at the table. Captain set 3 plates, cutlery, and some very beautiful crystal tumblers on the table. As Joe and Lan sorted the table, the captain carried over the food he'd been cooking. The only thing they recognized was the heap of yellow scrambled eggs, a staple of space station living. The rest, there were strips of a browned meat and a large golden brown loaf, a jug of an orange liquid. "Help yourself," he said. He started cutting the loaf. The smell was unlike anything they'd experienced. He handed a gently steaming slice towards Lan. "Some bread?" he asked. "That's bread?" She couldn't identify it. What bread was, on a space station, was actually a large mushroom that grew a dense fruiting body in the darker damp areas of the hydroponics and arboretums. This was treated in various ways, as bread would be on Earth. "Yes, this is real bread, made from wheat flour. I have a bread maker aboard, and sufficient storage for all the foodstuffs I could desire." He paused, a slight frown appearing. "Even if I don't often have someone to share it with." He looked up and recovered himself. "And this," he said, as if introducing them to a marvel of the universe. "This is bacon, real bacon, not the reprocessed chicken protein stuff that they use around here. Try it on the bread." As they ate, the food was indeed everything he claimed, and more. The orange drink tasted similar to the one they were used to, but had some bits floating in it. Never having had actual orange juice before, they couldn't identify it. That didn't stop them from enjoying the meal. As they ate, they also became more relaxed. The conversation became lighter, and they told the captain about themselves, opening up to a man that was a stranger but now seemed a friend. Soon enough, they finished and were sitting when Lan asked a question she wanted desperately to know but hadn't the courage to ask till now. "Is it true, then, what they say, that Starship captains are the wealthiest people? Are you paid so much?" Her voice trailed off, as she was unsure if she'd offended. "Oh, I'm not paid as much as you might think," he said. Lan looked around, skeptically. "You see, my pay rate is quite reasonable. Probably no more than the captain of one of the big passenger ships on the Earth-Mars run," he explained. "But how do you afford all this?" Joe asked. His math wasn't working. "Well, you see, my pay is based on the Earth calendar," he said, as if that explained everything. Their confused looks indicated otherwise. "The standard contract states that my salary is paid for the time worked, as it is experienced on Earth. The original lawyers knew the law well, but didn't know anything about relativistic theory. When I take a trip to one of the colony worlds, my time slows down, sometimes considerably, while the Earth time runs at its regular speed. I feel like I've been away a few months to come home to decades of back pay, which I can hardly spend anywhere. Most of it gets invested, and given my extended timeline, I can invest in very stable, safe instruments and yet make a lot of money. By law, we pay no taxes, partly because we work outside of all human jurisdictions, but also since we often outlive many governments or agencies. We're paid by a multinational fund managed by the United Nations of Earth Space Alliance. You can only spend so much on a house or yacht or fancy car that will be a broken-down wreck the next time you see it, so I put the money into my ship. I will spend my entire life aboard, so why not?" He finished this, drained his coffee, and stood. "Let's go. I found something very interesting in the database last night." They moved to a small office-like room. There was a simple desk, chair, and several old-style displays. The captain sat and opened a few files that appeared on one of the screens. Joe and Lan craned their necks to see. "Oh, that won't do," he said. With a motion of his hand, the display appeared in the air behind him. "You can see here," a dot appeared next to a line in the file, "that the Celestron was a real ship, launched just over 150 years ago. So that checks out. Also, the length of time for her to get to the reported position is plausible, too." His hands flicked the air at the bottom of the display. A map of the solar system appeared, the sun a yellow ball in the center. "To give you an idea why I am skeptical, here's our solar system: Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and the other outer planets." As he spoke, each planet appeared illuminated. "Here's this station, and a few of the others." More lights appeared in the cubicle map. Now it takes light from the sun about an hour to get to Jupiter as a frame of reference. Now I'll plot the position the message reported. He touched his wrist pad and the map began to zoom out. It kept going. The sun shrank from a baseball to a marble to a small sphere the size of a sesame seed. The planets and all the stations were invisible. Below the sun, with several arrows indicating the coordinates and orbital path, was a small green dot. There is the azure flame. If she exists, she's well out into deep space. Joe was studying the map, not comprehending the distances involved. How long would it take to get out to it? He asked. Well, if you could hire one of the best intersystem ships at their top speed, 30 or 40 years, the captain said. 40 years? Lon's voice was incredulous. She looked at Joe, and they both saw dreams bursting like soap bubbles. Yes, said the captain. You'd need the ship and crew, plus equipment for 80 years, plus whatever time you spent working on the Azure Flame when you go there. So the message was a fake, Joe said, figuring there's no way anything could have gotten that far. I had thought so too, but I found something interesting. The captain continued. This ship, the Celestron, roamed about the asteroid belt for a few decades. Then it did something unusual. The AI on board reached out to all the other ships still in operation and collected data on their successes. They, of course, had none. The last reported sighting of the Celestron processor was a drive signature accelerating out past the orbit of Neptune. They figured the AI had lost its mind with failure or something and had written it off. He paused here for a moment, changed the display to show a layout of the Celestron. A large spherical ship appeared, festooned with various antennae, grappling arms, and other things of unknown purpose. The scale showed the size of it. Joe whistled. I had no idea they were so big, he said. Yes, well, they had to be a mining ship, an ore processing facility, a smelting plant, a bit of self-repair, and the drive, controls, and power systems. They were really quite amazing feats of engineering. Entire nations went bankrupt just to build one. Few built two. The captain got a faraway look, as if lost in memories. So, it could have made it out there? Lon asked. It's entirely possible, and likely. I found out that she was one of the very last ones built. By then, the builders were getting desperate, so they began giving the AIs in control of these great ships a lot more autonomy and ingenuity. Unfortunately, that made some of them unstable, and the results were usually scattered around the asteroid belt, or a ship sitting idle, its computer mumbling to itself in an eternal deep depression. It's possible, though, that this ON simply decided that if it can't find what it needs here, it'd go look elsewhere, and the data backs it up. The captain paused, closing up the display with a wave of his hand. So it's real then? Lan asked. Hope's building. Real, but so out of reach. Joe punched his thigh, his frustration showing. Even had the azure flame been in the asteroid belt, it had been nearly impossible for them to get to it, now hopelessly out of reach. It was better if it was a hoax, he said. At least then we could let it go. Lan nodded. Their faces showed the disappointment, frustration, and loss they felt. The captain regarded them for a moment. Yes, it is unfortunate. If only you knew someone with the resources and a really fast ship. At least then you'd have a chance. Too bad, really. Lon looked towards the captain, her brows crunched together as if confused. Yes, you know a really fast ship, a nice big one, that could get you there in a month maybe, and in style too, not like those clumsy intersystem liners. The corners of the captain's mouth were almost in a smile. He was trying hard to look as sad and downcast as they felt. Lon looked at Joe. Then they looked at the captain. What are you saying? She asked. Would you help us find the azure flame? Oh, my dear. The captain laughed. I thought you'd never ask. They looked at each other incredulously for a moment, then leapt up. They shared a hug. Lan kissed Joe's cheek quickly, and he was supersized and delighted yet again. The three of them shared the laughter now and some excited talk. The captain brought them back to reality. "It's not a sure thing yet," he said more calmly than they felt. "We have plans to make, contracts to write up, and a lot of other work yet. I have to notify the proper authorities that I will finally be taking some of my accrued leave. I hope I have enough." "How much do you have?" Joe asked. He knew his parents got the standard 30 days per Earth year, but he had no idea what the captain had. "Oh, I get the standard contract 30 days per year, which if my math is right means that by now I think I have 7 years of action time coming." He laughed at this. Lan and Joe just stared. "Well, I never really wanted to go back Earthside that often, and it accrues on the same calendar as my pay, so it just kind of collected faster than I could use it." He laughed again. "What contracts, though?" Lan asked. Her father was an administrator on the station, and she'd heard enough of his work calls to know that contracts were serious, and usually meant someone paid for something. "Well, first, we have to file an indefinite salvage claim to make sure we have the legal bona fides if we find anything out there. Even that might not be enough, but it's our best start. Then there's the partnership," he explained. "Partnership?" Lan asked. "Yes, a 3-way split perhaps?" He replied. "You two and me. If we're successful, we will be very well off, even by my standards. But we have to get there first. I'm willing to fund the enterprise. For a share, success or failure, share and share alike." They excitedly agreed, but the captain stopped them. "You go home, tell your parents that we will meet here tomorrow evening. I will have my ship create the necessary documents, and I'll start the arrangements. Have them bring their lawyers, if they have one." Joe and Lon agreed to this quickly, absolutely sure their parents would be fully on board. They began to excitedly plan their adventure. "Oh, enough of that for tomorrow. Out with you now. I have a lot of work to do, and it must be done right. Message me if anything comes up. Until then, see you tomorrow evening, 1800 hours, a business dinner." He walked them out of the ship. They barely noticed, so absorbed in their excitement. After they had left, the captain returned to his small office. "Sonny," he said, "wake up. We have some work to do." Sundancer's AI had a soft, feminine voice. "I'm awake. What do we have to do?" "Well, to start, we need an indefinite salvage contract, 3 parties," he began, and he was right. His work took him well into the evening. End Part 5.